Section 1. The setup. This summer, something is going to quietly break for millions of American families. Not all at once, not with any warning, just slowly and without announcement. A bill that does not add up. A paycheck that runs out before the month does. An email that opens with the words, "We appreciate your contributions." You can already feel it, that low background hum, that knowing before the day has even started that the numbers are going to fall short again. But this summer is different because 7 separate things are hitting at the exact same time. AI is wiping out white-collar jobs that people spent decades building. Electricity costs are rising into the hottest summer on record right after the government ended the program that helped 6 million households afford their power bills. Gas is climbing toward numbers that make driving to work a losing deal. The September grocery bill is already being locked in 15 to 30% higher than March. The insurance renewal is in the mail, credit card interest is compounding at nearly 24%, and the house that people are holding on to as their last safety net is actually a trap. None of this is bad luck, because every single one of these things was built, a decision made by someone for someone, and this is what is actually happening right now, and what you can still do about it. Section 2. The assumption that stopped working. For 30 years, the professional class told itself a comforting story about automation, that machines were replacing physical jobs, assembly lines, warehouses, checkout counters, and that the people watching from their office chairs felt safe because their work needed judgment and relationships, things a machine could not replicate. But that assumption just died. In April 2026, Seeking Alpha published a report titled 2026, the year AI-related job losses become real, and the finding was direct, stating that AI-driven job losses will reduce consumer confidence and create a real economic headwind in the second half of this year, with more than half of Americans already believing that AI will do more harm than good to the economy. Here is the part that catches people off guard. AI does not need to be smarter than a human to replace one. It only needs to be cheaper and fast enough. And for white-collar work like analysis, report writing, legal research, and financial modeling, it is now both. Fortune marked the turning point in February 2026 with a piece called "The Week the AI Scare Turned Real," where the founder of research firm Unicus told them that companies will push into AI as hard and fast as they can, cutting significant numbers of jobs, with some businesses stopping to exist altogether, and she projected high unemployment and ongoing inflation through the rest of this year. CIO magazine followed in January with a piece on 3 AI truths nobody wanted to hear, confirming that mass layoffs will only increase, with Microsoft, Siemens, Google, Meta, and Amazon already cutting thousands of white-collar positions globally. And then they wrote one line worth reading twice. The harsh reality is that most people do not have a financial safety net that would allow them to spend a year rebuilding their professional identity. The layoff email arrives in July, severance covers 8 to 12 weeks, and the job market is not absorbing the workers being pushed out. And an AON survey found that 71% of employed Americans are staying in their current jobs out of fear, which means fewer openings for the people being forced out. Think about Marcus, 43 years old, a financial analyst with 15 years of experience, a mortgage locked at 3.2%, and 2 kids, because when that email arrives, he has about 90 days before his situation becomes permanent, while every firm in his sector runs the same calculation that just replaced him. And that story is playing out across the country right now, while 5 other crises hit the same households at the same time. Section 3. The safety net cut before the hottest summer. Add this to everything else. The federal government just ended the program that helped 6 million households pay their electric bills, because LIHEAP, the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, was cut from the 2026 budget. And for many of those families, that $300 to $600 a year was the number that kept the power on, and now it is gone. The timing could not be worse, because the last 3 summers each broke the previous global temperature record, and NOAA is projecting above-average temperatures across most of the country through August 2026. And when it gets hot, people run air conditioning. And when that runs, electricity demand jumps. And 43% of American electricity comes from natural gas. And natural gas follows oil. And oil just surged nearly 5% in a single session, because Israel and Iran exchanged direct missile strikes, and the Strait of Hormuz has been closed for more than 100 days. The chain is direct. Oil spikes, natural gas rises, electricity bills rise, and the bill arriving in August will look nothing like the one from April. And the National Energy Assistance Directors Association projected average summer cooling costs at $719 per household before the latest oil surge, with the realistic figure now sitting between $800 and $900, and in the south and southwest, where temperatures stay above 100 degrees for weeks and air conditioning is a medical necessity, the seasonal bill could top $1,200. The CDC has documented that extreme heat kills more Americans than hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and lightning combined. And the 2021 Pacific Northwest heat dome killed more than 800 people, most of them elderly, most of them alone, most found in homes without working air conditioning. And that was just a few days in one region, while what is coming this summer is nationwide, sustained, and it arrives with the safety net already removed. Section 4. The commute math. Nobody is talking about. There is another crisis building quietly that almost no one has connected to everything else, and it does not have a dramatic name and it is not on the news, but it is going to quietly destroy the finances of millions of households, and it is the commute. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics reports that 76% of American workers drive to work alone. And right now, gas is averaging $4.55 nationally, with California at $6.13 and parts of San Francisco already seeing diesel above $8. The average American commute is 27.5 minutes each way, about 16 miles each direction, 32 miles round trip, and at 25 miles per gallon, that is roughly 6.5 gallons burned every week just getting to work, which at $4.55 comes to about $29 a week or $126 a month, and at $6 it climbs to $168, and at $8 where San Francisco diesel already sits, and where national gasoline could land by August if the strait stays closed, the weekly commute hits $52 or $222 a month. The MIT living wage calculator puts the income floor for a single adult at $15 to $18 an hour in most cities, and at that wage, total weekly commuting costs at $8 gas run between $160 and $265 out of a weekly take-home of roughly $550, which means up to 48% of take-home pay is gone before rent, food, or anything else. And in a two-income household where both adults commute, total fixed expenses push past 100% of income, which is not a tight budget but a deficit being lived right now by families who have no other option, because the public transit that might have helped them was dismantled over decades and never rebuilt. The problem is not that gas is expensive, it is that going to work is becoming a transaction that costs more than it pays. So drop it in the comments below if the cost of your commute has changed how you think about where you work, because I actually read the comments. Section 5. The grocery bill that has not arrived yet. Here is the one that is going to blindside people in September, and the reason it will is simple. It is completely invisible right now, even as it is being locked in, because the food on shelves today reflects last season's farming costs, while the food arriving in September reflects this season's, and this season's costs are the highest in the recorded history of American agriculture. There is a 6 to 9 month delay between what it costs to grow food and what you pay at the register, because the fertilizer, the diesel, the water, and the labor all move through the supply chain and show up at retail months later, which means the prices you are paying right now, as painful as they already are, still reflect the old cost structure, and the new one has not landed yet. Russia and Belarus supply about 35% of global potash and 15% of global nitrogen fertilizer, and sanctions from the Ukraine conflict have kept those prices elevated for 3 years, and the Hormuz closure cut off Middle Eastern fertilizer exports from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, and Iran, while Brent crude averaged $117 in April and climbed further after the Israel-Iran exchange, and Chicago diesel hit a record $6.30 per gallon just this past week. The U.S. Census of Agriculture confirms the average American farmer is 58 years old, operating on margins that have been negative for multiple seasons, and planting right now with input costs 40 to 80% higher than in 2019, and the bird flu is still circulating, with over 200 million birds culled since 2020 in the largest animal disease event in American history, and egg prices surged 57% in 2025, and poultry producers say feed and diesel costs are now pushing margins past the point of survival, and producers who leave take capacity with them that the system cannot easily replace. Newsweek recently confirmed that the Ogallala Aquifer, which supplies 30% of all irrigation groundwater and supports roughly one-fifth of American agricultural output, is running out, with NASA satellite data showing water levels down more than 200 feet in some areas, and Kansas having reached day zero conditions for 30% of its aquifer, while California's Central Valley, which produces a third of the nation's vegetables and two-thirds of its fruits and nuts, faces the same pressure at the same time. Every one of those costs, fertilizer, diesel, water stress, disease recovery, and labor shortages, moves through the supply chain and surfaces at retail with a 6 to 9 month delay, and the grocery bill you pay in September will be the first one that fully reflects the 2026 growing season, with industry projections putting it 15 to 30% higher than March. And the nightly news has not connected these dots because the lag makes it invisible to broadcast cycles. But it is not invisible to the farmers in the field right now who know exactly what this crop cost to plant, and it will not be invisible to you in September. Section 6. The letter that breaks the math. At this point in the conversation, people usually do the same thing. They go through the layoffs, the electricity, the gas, and the groceries, and then they reach for the one number that still feels solid, the house, the equity, the thing that is supposed to hold when everything else falls apart. But hold that thought, because there is an envelope arriving this summer that is going to change how that calculation looks entirely. For millions of homeowners, the insurance renewal is coming, and for a lot of them, the number on that form is going to be the moment the budget stops working. And Deep Sky Research documented what has already happened to Florida's homeowners insurance market over the past decade, showing that active policies collapsed from 3.22 million to 710,000, a 78% drop, with new policies written quarterly falling from 164,000 to 37,000. As State Farm exited, Farmers Insurance exited, and Allstate began restricting coverage, while Citizens Property Insurance, the state-run insurer of last resort, went from 6% of the market to 63%. People outside Florida hear that and think it is a Florida problem, but it is not, because Bankrate's national survey found homeowners' insurance premiums rose 33% across the country between 2020 and 2025, and in states with significant wildfire, hurricane, tornado, or flood risk, 50 to 100% increases are not unusual, with Texas averaging 27% in a single year, Louisiana seeing 40 to 63%, and Colorado wildfire zone homeowners watching their premiums double or triple. Renters are not exempt either, because when a landlord's premium rises, it passes through at the next lease renewal, and a family paying $1,800 a year opens an envelope that says $3,200, and a family paying $3,500 finds $5,800 inside. And the payment is not optional, because if you carry a mortgage, your lender requires insurance. And if you drop the policy, the lender force places coverage at 2 to 3 times the voluntary market rate and adds it to your mortgage payment with no negotiation and no way out. Homing noted in an April 2026 analysis that almost no one who bought a home in the last 5 years understood the downstream consequence, which is that no available insurance means no mortgage-backed buyer, and no mortgage-backed buyer means only cash buyers who typically offer 20 to 40% below market value. And since 65% of American households hold their primary wealth in home equity, when the insurance market eliminates the buyer pool, that wealth does not just shrink, it quietly disappears. Section 7. The interest that is eating them alive. So the equity is gone as a safety net, and the credit card is already running low on room because 111 million Americans are carrying a revolving credit card balance right now, according to the Federal Reserve's May 2026 Household Debt Report. And it is important to be clear about what that means, because this is not a story about people spending carelessly. The majority of that debt was built up paying for groceries, gas, medical bills, utility gaps, and the monthly shortfall between what people earn and what things cost. And the average interest rate on those balances is 23.79%, the highest in the history of the Federal Reserve's tracking data. Look at the math directly, because it is designed to be hard to see clearly. $6,000, roughly the national average balance, carries a minimum payment at 2% of about $120 a month, and of that, roughly $119 goes to interest while $1 goes to the actual debt, which means that at that rate, paying off $6,000 takes over 30 years and costs more than $15,000 in interest, 2.5 times what was originally borrowed. Equifax confirmed total consumer debt hit an all-time high of $18.19 trillion in March 2026. Driven by lower-income borrowers taking on more debt and carrying higher balances. And Wolf Street's analysis of Federal Reserve data shows that total credit limits were raised to a record $5.5 trillion in the first quarter of 2026. And the banks did not raise those limits because borrowers became more trustworthy. They raised them because higher limits mean more spending, bigger balances, and more interest income. Student loan delinquency has reached 17%. Total household debt delinquency sits at 4.8%. And for the deepest subprime borrowers, credit use is at 99.2%, meaning essentially every dollar of available credit is already committed. And when that buffer runs out and the minimum payment can no longer be made, a chain reaction begins where the card closes, the credit score drops, other lenders raise rates, the auto loan gets denied, the apartment application gets rejected, and the person who was holding everything together with minimum payments and available credit falls through a floor that no longer exists. Section 8. The house that is not a rescue. And through all of this, people hold on to one final assumption. The house, the equity, the asset that is supposed to be the last line of defense, but it is not a rescue, it is a trap. Vanguard recently published an analysis using a phrase that had never appeared in housing economics before, calling it rational inertia, and what it describes is the most structurally stuck situation in the American financial system right now, because about 50% of all mortgage borrowers in the US hold interest rates below 4% and 80% hold rates below 6%, rates that were locked in during 2020 and 2021 when the Federal Reserve dropped rates to near zero, while the current 30-year mortgage rate sits near 6.7%. And the rate is attached to the property, not the person. So to keep the low rate, you stay in the house and sell it, and the rate is gone permanently. On a $400,000 home, the difference between a 3% mortgage and a 6.7% mortgage is roughly $900 a month. And that one number has frozen the housing market, with nobody selling, inventory collapsing, and prices failing to correct despite affordability being at its worst level in recorded US housing data. And Redfin confirms a household now needs $110,000 annually to afford the typical American home, while median household income sits at roughly $81,000, leaving a $29,000 gap between what is needed and what most families earn. JP Morgan estimates the housing shortage at 2.8 million units and says resolving it could take a decade. And while you are locked in the cost of staying rises every month because property taxes climbed as assessed values rose with the market, even though that equity is out of reach without selling, the insurance renewal just added 27 to 60% to the annual premium. Utilities are rising because natural gas follows oil and LIHEAP was cut, and contractors, plumbers, and roofers are charging more because their own material costs went up. Between 2026 and 2036, an estimated 13 to 15 million baby boomer-owned homes will enter the market, roughly 250,000 additional units a year for a decade, many of them sitting in car-dependent suburbs built for $2 gas. And when that supply arrives, the scarcity holding current prices up disappears, and the $400,000 home could be worth $280,000, which means the house is not an asset right now, but a position, locked in, unable to sell, refinance, or relocate, watching costs climb while every exit closes. Section 9. The weight of all of it at once. And all of these pressures land on the same person, in the same body, in the same week, because 90% of Americans say the country is in a mental health crisis, according to a Kaiser Family Foundation survey from late 2025, with 9 in 10 adults across income levels and backgrounds essentially agreeing that something is deeply wrong with the psychological state of the country. The American Psychological Association confirms that financial pressure is the single largest driver of anxiety and depression in the United States. Not health, not relationships, not politics, but money, the constant grinding math of not having enough. And this summer, every one of these pressures lands at the same time. The layoff, the electricity surge, the commute math, the September grocery bill, the insurance renewal, the credit card compounding at 23.79%, the house costing more every month with every exit sealed. These are not separate problems, they are one problem arriving through different envelopes, and the human nervous system was not built for sustained compounding financial pressure like this, because the stress response that evolved to help us survive physical danger does not have an off switch for ongoing money stress, and your body cannot tell the difference between a physical threat and a bill you cannot pay. So hormones built to run for minutes end up running for months. The consequences are documented and measurable. Insomnia, depression, immune suppression, cardiovascular stress, and reduced ability to think clearly, because financial stress does not just feel bad, it measurably lowers your ability to make good decisions about the exact problems that created the stress in the first place. And the CDC has documented that 264,000 Americans die every year from what researchers call deaths of despair, drug overdose, alcohol-related illness, and suicide, a number that goes up every year. And the people behind that number are not people who gave up. They are people who carried more than a person can hold for longer than anyone should have to. Section 10. The part nobody says out loud. Now here is what matters and what does not get said clearly enough. None of this was inevitable, because every crisis in this video has a specific policy origin, a specific decision, a specific person who benefited, and a specific person who paid the cost. And these conditions were built, which means they are not permanent laws of nature. The 23.79% credit card rate did not come from a free market. It came from a 1978 Supreme Court decision, Marquette National Bank versus First of Omaha, that allowed banks to apply the interest rate laws of their home state to customers anywhere in the country, and the banks moved to South Dakota and Delaware, where interest rate caps had been removed. So before that ruling, most states capped consumer interest at 12 to 18%, and after it 24% became the standard, meaning 9 people made that call, and it has trapped hundreds of millions of borrowers in a compounding cycle they were never clearly warned about. The weakness of the food supply, where any disruption becomes a price crisis, traces back to anti-monopoly enforcement decisions made across 3 administrations, because 4 companies now control 85% of the beef supply in the United States, and a market that concentrated has almost no room to absorb shocks. The elimination of LIHIP was a budget decision made in 2026 by a government spending roughly $1 billion a day on military conflict in the Middle East and $1 trillion a year on interest payments on $39 trillion in national debt. And the money exists, but the choice was made about where it would go. Every one of these choices had a beneficiary. The corporations posting record profits, the banks generating record interest income, the insurance companies raising premiums while quietly leaving the markets where risk is highest, and the top 10% whose spending now drives 50% of GDP, and the casualties are the 111 million carrying credit card balances, the 45% who say they cannot make ends meet, the 771,000 experiencing homelessness, the 264,000 dying of despair, and the 90% who say the mental health crisis is real because they are living inside it. The system is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was built to do, moving wealth upward and pushing costs downward. And this summer, that process is accelerating at the exact moment the people absorbing it have run out of room. Section 11. What you can actually do. So what does preparation look like when the math is already this far gone? Because the people who get through fast-moving crises most successfully are never the ones with the biggest reserves at the start. They are the ones who had accurate information early enough to act on it. And here is what acting looks like in the next 90 days. If you are employed right now, your job is your most valuable asset, not the savings, not the home equity. The job, So make yourself hard to replace by learning the tools your company is moving toward. Volunteering for projects no one else wants, and being the last name anyone would put on a list because the AI layoff wave is not coming. It is already here, and the best defense is not a better resume, but being too valuable to let go. Cut non-essential spending this week, not eventually, but this week, by canceling subscriptions you are not actively using, downgrading service plans where you can, and stopping eating out, because every dollar you redirect from spending you can cut toward your emergency fund or your highest rate debt is a dollar buying you time, and time is exactly what the next 90 days require. Pay down your highest rate debt as aggressively as your budget allows, because eliminating a balance at 23.79% gives you a 23.79% return on every dollar, and no investment available to most people guarantees that, making paying off high-interest debt the single best financial move available to you right now. Build a food buffer by adding an extra $20 to $50 per grocery run for the next 12 weeks, focusing on rice, beans, pasta, canned protein, peanut butter, cooking oil, and other shelf-stable basics, because by the end of summer, you will have 90 days of food bought at June prices, and when the September bill lands 15 to 30% higher, you will have already bought ahead of it. Fill your gas tank today and keep it above half, because every gallon at $4.55 is a gallon you will not buy at 6 or 7, and consolidate trips, combine errands, and if there is any possibility of a remote work conversation with your employer, have it now. Not as a preference, but as a financial survival calculation, because at $6 to $8 gas, the commute may cost more than it contributes, and that conversation needs to happen before you hit the brake. Even point, not after. Keep $500 in physical cash at home, because when systems come under sustained economic pressure, cash is the only thing that works regardless of network failures, app outages, or card processor issues. And then do the one thing that costs nothing at all. Check on the people around you, the neighbor you have not seen in 2 weeks, the colleague who has gone quiet, the friend who cancelled 3 times and stopped explaining why because 90% of the country says the mental health crisis is real, the programs meant to catch people when they fall have been cut, and institutional support is overwhelmed. The person sitting in their car in the driveway after work, not ready to go inside and face the bills on the counter, is not failing. They are carrying the accumulated weight of a system that has been shifting costs downward for 40 years and accelerating that shift this summer. And what separates the family that gets through from the one that does not is not the size of the account, but whether someone knocked on the door, whether a message arrived asking how things were really going and meant it, whether someone in their life noticed before the silence became something worse. The situation is real, it is serious, and it is landing on kitchen tables across this country right now, but difficult is not the same as unsurvivable, and difficult with the right information, real preparation, and people around you paying attention is something that has been survived before and can be survived again. So drop your honest answer below if any part of this has changed how you are thinking about the next few months.